Much appreciated. Your contribution is going to help us to refine this survey instrument. I wanted to provide some instruction about how to do a Q-sort. Some of you won't be familiar with the process, and it can be a little bit frustrating for those of you where there's some uncertainty about what's going on. So I'm just going to step you through the process very, very quickly here. It involves two main steps. The first step involves an initial sort, and here what we're going to do is actually read the individual statements and just put them into one of three groups depending on whether we disagree. Let's just say that I do, hypothetically, disagree with this one, and then this one maybe I am neutral, and let's say that I agree with this one, and I'll just keep going as I read through and distribute them into the three piles. I'm going to call them groups. Okay, now we've made it to the next stage of the process where we go from the initial sort and we actually perform what we call the Q-sort. The idea here is to actually move all these statements into this distribution. This distribution will sort of expand as we go. You'll see what I mean by that. From left, where we have the most strongly disagree statements, and as we move from left to right, we're going to incrementally disagree with slightly less or agree with slightly more as we move along until we get to the, let's see, the distribution, to the ninth group, which will end up ultimately being the statements that we most strongly disagree with out of all these. Very likely to come from this pile, of course. Rather than actually scroll across, you can zoom out using these buttons to see the whole distribution. Let's see, one more time. I tend to prefer to be able to do this. Now, to do this, there's a couple of ways, and maybe you find a way that suits you better. It doesn't really matter how you do this, as long as you end up with that distribution from most strongly disagree to most strongly agree across the groups. But the standard approach usually involves reading through the statements. Ideally, you would be able to read them all on the screen together. We can't do this here. I kind of like to be able to sort of eyeball all together, but let's say that I can do this and work out which one of those I disagree with most strongly. Now let's assume it's this one, and for speed, let's just pull these three that, having read through them all, I say these are the ones that I really feel most strongly about. And then I keep going, and with the ones that are left, which are the three, so we need three here, the three that I disagree with most strongly. We're just going to pull them down here randomly. Of course, you're not going to do that. You're going to read through and work out and make sure that you do actually happen to disagree with these a bit less than these ones. And if that isn't the case, you can find the cards which are a bit out of sequence and then move them. Now, like that. Okay, and we're going to keep going across the distribution. Okay, now I've gone through and I've sorted all the disagree statements into the distribution, and now I've got to the neutral pile. The way I'm going to start that is I'm going to look through and find the pile that still has a few items required and read through and have a look and see, oh, I don't really feel that strongly about these, but of these, which ones do I disagree with the most strongly? And let's say it's these three here. Oops. And I'm going to drag them down. Probably worth noting quickly that this isn't the only way you can do this. You can also click move and decide which column you want that card to go to. I prefer to actually drag them down and do them in sequence. You might have a different approach. Okay, so now I'm getting to the end of my neutral pile, and I've actually distributed those cards, those statements in there from disagree to agree as I go across the distribution. I've got to the end of the card, and I haven't quite filled this pile up here, and now I'm going to move to the agree group up the top. This time I'm going to read through and find the three cards that I agree with the most strongly, and I'm going to move them into this group now. I'm actually not necessarily going to agree with what I'm putting down here, but this is hypothetical. And I'm going to do the same that I did at the other end, but in reverse. I'm going to move to the right with cards that I progressively agree with a little bit less strongly than the piles or the groups to the right. Once I've done that, I've actually finished my preliminary Q-sort, but it's worth having a look and just making sure that you're happy with this general distribution. You may find a card that's out of place. Just say, for example, I think this happens to be a card that I didn't actually notice that I really do feel strongly about. I may decide to actually put it in this pile, and then because each of the groups has a quota, I then have to distribute back. Now, you wouldn't normally just find a statement to swap it with. you actually kind of shuffle back, so you maintain the overall sequence. So I need to find a statement here that I don't quite agree with as strongly to fill the gap in here. Done that, and then I need to do that again with this pile group and find one card that I'm not quite as passionate about, and then I've achieved my overall distribution. Once I'm happy with that, I've finished doing my Q sort. So congratulations, and you can move on to the rest of the survey. So thank you again.